All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark. Today we're going to be talking about Episode 7, the penultimate episode of Skeleton Crew. This could be Season 1, this could be the start of a multi-season show. We don't know. The numbers from the Nielsen ratings were not optimistic, so I don't know what the future plans for this show are, but we're only focusing on Episode 7 today, and this was probably my favorite episode of the series. Maybe my second favorite. I still really love episode 3 with the introduction of Jod to the kids and that intrigue around the jewel planets of the Old Republic. All of that was really fun and exciting. But episode 7 has a lot of great stuff going for it. We have Jod fully embracing the darkest corners of himself. We see him kill in cold blood multiple times in this episode, whether it's Brutus, the ship captain of the pirates, or SM right in front of the kids with a lightsaber. I still feel that they're working towards a redemption for Jod's character by the end of this season, but I'm not going to lie, it's going to take a lot for me to be convinced of his redemption, especially after everything he's done so far, and I don't want it to feel cheap or unearned, which has been prevalent in other live-action Star Wars shows, so fingers crossed for Jod. Jude Law is still incredible in the role, and there's also the potential that he stays bad and he goes out in a blaze of glory in this last episode. He loses his whole manipulation of the children, backfires on him, and we see the end of Jod at the end of the series. Who knows, but we'll see in a couple of days. Other things that I really enjoyed about this episode, I think the score is much more present and it elevates the material a lot more than it has done in previous episodes. Not that the score has been bad. I really like the fanfare type score that Mick Giacchino has gone for in this series. It feels like an 80s nostalgic throwback score with a sprinkle of that Star Wars mysticism in the music and the instrument choices. But in this episode, I can point out certain scenes that I'm like, yeah, the music was the star of that scene. So when Jod finally sees all the credits and the mint and they start pouring onto him and we hear that sinister violin kind of going back and forth, that was a great moment. And then when the kids are looking at Attin for the first time again when they return home, we have this amazing space shot of them looking through the viewport with the sun coming through and them seeing the planet, and the theme of Skeleton Crew starts playing and it's a little bit more beefed up, and it's a great moment again that the score is able to elevate. The Skeleton Crew theme itself is really great. I love the melody. It feels like Star Wars, and that's been the strong point of the score, but I feel like in the episodes it's been kind of background-esque. It hasn't really been driving the momentum of the scene. So I'm hoping we see more of that in the next episode, in the finale. If you did notice when I said the composer's name, yes, Mick Giacchino is Michael Giacchino's son. Michael Giacchino is the composer for Rogue One, which had a great soundtrack. So it's really cool to see the composer lineage working its way into Star Wars, and both of them bringing very different takes to the Star Wars galaxy. You know, Rogue One was much more gritty with that Star Wars feel, but Skeleton Crew is much more whimsical in its score. So I like that they're both kind of working in different realms in Star Wars. I alluded to it a bit earlier, but this episode had a lot of satisfying twists and turns, and it had me anticipating what was going to happen next. You know, Jod killing SM, killing Brutus, them finally getting to the Mint vaults and not really knowing what was going to happen. Were they going to open the vaults and it not be full of credits? Were we going to see something sinister that's really running all of this? We'll see next week, but during this episode I was like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? I don't know. When it comes to negatives for this episode, it really falls back to what I've been saying all season. I feel the parent story is very underdeveloped. I feel like they could have added a lot more meat to that storyline to make this quest to find their kids feel more impactful, and the separation that the kids have from their parents feel more meaningful. But in this case, it feels like they've just been in the background, and I feel like they were hyping it up a bit more earlier in the season when we had the shots of Wim's dad being very skeptical of the power structure of the planet and not being confident that the government of the planet would be able to find their kids. I thought we were going to see a lot more espionage with the parents, but we kind of opened this episode with them already committing treason, sending up this probe to send out a message to find the kids. I feel like there should have been more build-up there, especially when you have an actor like Carrie Condon, who is an Oscar-nominated actress. she's so talented, and I feel like she's been wasted throughout this series. We still have one episode to go, but they could have casted anyone, and it's a bit confusing why they would spend so much for Carrie Condon if she was going to be such a small part of this show. We all know that Disney doesn't know how to use a budget or create a budget, and that could be contributing to why they would be spending so much on big actors if they're not going to have significant roles. I mean, Carrie Ann Moss in The Acolyte was solid, but again, it didn't feel like we needed to go that big with an actress so known and so beloved if they weren't going to contribute that much to the story. The only other explanation I can have for this is that because this show is so baked in 80s nostalgia and relying on those 80s childhood adventure movies, the parents are always in the background. They're never really pushing the story forward. They're always passive characters who watch the story happen along with us, and the kids are really the heroes and the ones that figure everything out. But we are in a new era of storytelling, and I feel like this should have been way more fleshed out, and that the parents should have been more significant characters than just worried parents. I really wish we got more out of them, and maybe we will in the finale, but that's just how I'm feeling now, especially because they had the opening scene of this episode. The other negative for me is something that's been present throughout this series, and that is the conveniences. In this episode in particular, SM33 finally goes against the pirate code, even though throughout this entire season, he has been the one that has upheld the pirate code to the highest degree. And while I agree that it would be a good moment from a story beat perspective to have SM finally not adhere to the pirate code and him be acting against his protocol and have his own free will and him picking the kids over the pirate code, it would be a great moment, but I don't think we really built to that. He just continually gets beaten up, put back together, turned off, turned back on, and we don't ever get that moment where the kids break through to him with new protocol or fixing him up and they change something in his code. I feel like all of that would have been more satisfying than him just conveniently turning on Jod in a moment when Jod clearly had the upper hand in this situation and SM saves the kids. That felt very convenient, and it also feels like there was maybe some missing moments throughout this season that could have built up SM a bit more to have that arc where he would finally break the pirate code, but we don't see it. I mean, I think that's the only big convenience in this episode, but it is at a very crucial moment, so that's why I call it out. I do want to jump back to Jod because he is the strongest character in the show. In the beginning of the season, and even towards the middle of the season, I was very scared that they were going to do a very easy Heart of Gold scoundrel turn where he would become a father figure to the kids, he would get them home safely, they would break through to him, and he would have this really formulaic Han Solo turn from A New Hope in Skeleton Crew. But I appreciate the creators of the show going all in on making Jod the villain in these past 2 episodes. He has done some terrible things, and it feels natural for his character. It doesn't feel out of character, maybe like some other turns have felt like in other Star Wars series. And it makes you reflect on all the interactions he had with the kids. Was he manipulating them? Was it genuine? And it's a bit of both, right? He needed to gain favor with the kids so that he could get the coordinates to At Attin, so it was in his best interest to keep them safe, to look out for them. But now that he has it, we see the Crimson Jack persona come out. But there's also those scenes where he shares a moment with Wim, where there was no need for him to go back into that room where Wim was crying and talk about his mom. Something in Jod is good because that part of him made him go back and give the lesson to Wim. I'm not saying the lesson was the right lesson. He basically said, don't have any attachments, don't have any friends. That's the only way to survive in this galaxy. But there was a piece of him that connected with Wim, and I think they have to draw on that in this finale to have a believable redemption for him, if that's the route they go on. This is all speculating. But Star Wars is very much about redemption. It would make sense because they did plant those seeds throughout this season. The concern is that after what we just saw Jod do in the last 2 episodes, will they believably make the redemption feel earned in this finale? Because Jod is at his darkest point in this series right now, so it would take a lot of effort to reverse this ship. I think it very much is going to come down to him telling his backstory to the kids, how he was once trained with the Force or how he was never trained with the Force, how he was abandoned and he was like the kids at one point. Something has to be given to us in this finale to add context as to who this character is, because If he was just a scoundrel like Han Solo, we don't really need a backstory because we kind of can infer it based on how the character is now and the world that they inhabit. But because he has the Force, that adds a whole other layer of intrigue and another layer of things that need to be explained, because you can't just throw in a Force user without giving us some understanding of where they're coming from. I just hope that this finale is long enough to flesh all of this out. And if they're saving it for future seasons, that's also concerning because the Nielsen ratings for Skeleton Crew, at least the first 2 weeks, were the lowest of any Star Wars series, most likely. And it also didn't crack the top 10 of streaming shows at that time when Nielsen took these ratings. This is a whole separate topic outside of Skeleton Crew, but these ratings, I think, one, show the fall off that Star Wars has had, especially from the Acolyte and all of the negativity surrounding that. I also think that the Star Wars Outlaws stuff, the video game sphere, is bleeding into TV and movies because there were a lot of casual Star Wars fans that loved Star Wars video games, and that kept them interested in the franchise. Even if they weren't always enthused by TV or movies, they would be interested in Star Wars because the games were still good. But with the release of Star Wars Outlaws and it being pretty average or underwhelming to a lot of people, I think that audience of Star Wars fans, you also lost them. So with the Acolyte, Outlaws, and just generally all the damage that they had done to Star Wars' name through the sequel trilogy being a failure and through other live action shows not living up to the expectations or the quality that they should have, I think all of that pent up bad blood towards Disney Star Wars is coming to roost and on full display now that a show that is getting really good critical reviews and a lot of Star Wars content creators are enjoying Skeleton Crew, but the casual fan, the large portion of the Star Wars fandom, is not interested in this show, and that's unfortunate. Again, I'm not saying this show is the best thing on earth. I'm not saying this show is even great. It has great moments, but I think there's still a lot of things that could be better. But it's a show that should be interesting to casual and diehard Star Wars fans, and unfortunately, I just think that casual audience is not here anymore. And I don't know what Disney would need to do, if anything, to get them back at this point. It would take a lot of good movies, it would take a lot of good TV shows, and I just don't know if that can happen in the next couple years. It could. Anything's possible if they release Mando and Grogu and it's amazing. If the James Mangold movie and the Rey movie even ever come out and they're amazing. If Ahsoka Season 2 is much better than Season 1. If Dave Filoni's Thrawn movie is amazing. All of these things are possible. I don't think Disney's track record has given me any confidence to think that's going to happen. The only project I'm confident in from Disney is Andor Season 2, and that's the final season of Andor. After that, it's a lot of just cautious optimism, and over the years, my optimism has gotten much, much smaller. I'm always going to be there for Star Wars. I'm always going to want it to be the best that it could be. That's why I have this podcast. But I simply don't trust Disney. And they refuse to take criticism. They don't make any leadership changes. It seems like Disney doesn't want to take any critical feedback. And the only positives I can take from The Acolyte being a massive failure and dividing the fandom even more, and Skeleton Crew, at least the first couple weeks of ratings being the lowest ever, I hope that this message is sent to Disney that, hey, you need to step your game up. You need to change things because you are losing people at a high rate. Do I think Disney will take the message? Not really. They haven't really taken many messages so far, but it's the only thing I can do. I can only hope, and Star Wars has taught me to hope, so that's what I'm going to do. But yeah, that tangent's over. I probably want to talk about the broader spectrum of Star Wars in a completely separate episode of this podcast, but back to Skeleton Crew. I really enjoyed episode 7. I don't have much else to say about it. Very much looking forward to the finale. I am very curious to see how they're going to wrap all of this up in one episode. Maybe we'll get a longer episode than typical. I doubt it. It seems like most of these Disney Star Wars shows can't crack that 35-minute mark. But I think they would need all of that time to flesh out Jod and his backstory, if there is a redemption, if he does bite the dust. How will the kids deal with the fact that their parents had been hiding all of this information from them for their entire lives? Will they reject this society? How will At Attin be affected by the kids knowing this about the Mint? And how cut off they really are from the galaxy. Is there some sort of revolution that will be started? That definitely can't happen in the finale, but it could be setting up for a season 2. I don't know if they're going to get a season 2 based on the ratings, but I'm hoping the word of mouth has really added viewers as the season has gone on, and when Nielsen finally gets the final ratings for the middle and back half of the season, maybe those will be a lot more positive, because Disney needs to see that good shows should be rewarded and bad shows should not be rewarded. So thank you guys for listening. Please leave a rating or a review on whatever streaming platform you're listening to this on. As I mentioned the other day on my Instagram, I just launched the Star Wars Mark of Balance YouTube channel. Please go subscribe on there. If you're listening to this on YouTube, I appreciate you being here. And if you want to get updates like that, follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_Mark of Balance. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.